afternoon, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Thursday, SecDataOps. I got to give it, listen, I want W's in chat for Robbie and those graphics. I got to give it to Robbie. He really outdid himself with the graphics for today's fight night. I love the graphics that Robbie does for the stream all the time, but I got to say the ones he's done for fight night have been absolutely amazing. So W's to Robbie for that one. Happy Thursday, everybody. Welcome to our April 10th episode of SecDataOps, or Security Data Operations. This is our bi-monthly stream where we talk about everything security operations, everything data operations, and really the convergence of the two of those in the modern day cybersecurity team. You can tell like it's getting to that time of the day where my words are starting to mesh together. I'm going to hit the rules really fast before we talk about what today's stream is all about. So obviously the first and foremost rule is always the most important, right? No toxicity. What does that mean? We have a zero tolerance for any racist, sexist, misogynistic, or any otherwise toxic behavior in chat. There's a zero tolerance policy for that. We are streaming live across LinkedIn, Twitch, YouTube, and X. We do have moderators in each of those platforms. Huge shout out to our moderators. Who are here to keep chat free of any of that type of behavior as well. Our moderators make no qualms about utilizing that ban button in their respective platforms. Mods are not here, however, to stifle chat in any way. If you're new here to the stream, you know that we absolutely welcome and love friendly civil discourse and chat across whatever platform. And so we highly, highly encourage you to commune and participate in chat with your fellow cybersecurity professionals, whatever platform you happen to be tuning into us on. Love to see the chat hitting it up already, inside of chat. So keep the chat flowing. With that being said, we have this very special SecDataOps today. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about our second rule, which is more of a reminder, which is around questions. We are going to do today's fight night debate style. And so what that means is that I'm going to be pitting two CISOs against each other, and I'll kind of talk about that here in a little bit. I want you to continue to still ask your questions in chat at any point in time. You could drop them in chat. Moderators are going to grab those chat questions and put them into a queue, and we will be presenting them to our debate panel or our debate panelist here during the stream. Unlike our normal streams where we can ask questions in real time, we're going to allow the debate participants to go at each other on their respective topics. And so we'll be aggregating the questions and then saving those for an audience dedicated section. Specifically around, some of the questions from the audience. And so it's all the more important that if you hear one of our debate panelists say something defending or promoting a particular topic that you're interested in, that you absolutely get that question in, and we'll do our best to address that question towards the end and allow that debate participant to respond to said question. With that being said, either way, bottom line is always get those questions in early. Don't wait till the last minute. That is kind of the benefit of this stream being live, is that you can get those questions in early, and we will get them to the respective people to get them answered ASAP. So with that being said, let's talk about today's stream. And with that being said, I'm actually going to bring in our debate panelist here. Okay, good. That transition worked. It's always skeptical whenever I do the transition. So I want to welcome our debate panelists. First and foremost, I'm going to welcome Rudy Ristich. Rudy's been here before. Rudy, say hi to stream. You've been here before.
Yeah, yo.
Okay. Thanks, Rudy, for coming back. Rudy is the CISO for Avant, the CISO and the CPO for Avant. Great, fantastic security, experience. He was on the stream a couple months ago. He did such a great job, and chat seemed to love him so well that we decided to ask him to come back. Rudy is going to be representing the skeptical anti-AI side of AI in the SOC. So he's here defending all those folks who think that AI is not here to take your jobs. AI is bad for the SOC. There's no way that AI can replace a SOC analyst. So Rudy is here defending that side of the equation. Paired beside him is somebody who's new to the stream. So let's give a huge cyber insecurity SecDataOps welcome to Kwak. I've had the privilege of knowing Q for a year and a half now. Q, I think we've known each other, something like that.
Yeah, it's about 2 years.
About 2 years, yeah. Q's the CISO at Pearson, former CISO at Morgan, E-Trade, bought by Morgan Stanley. tons of years of experience, leading security teams for large financial companies. I've done dinner with Q a number of times. We've hung out at events together. I've talked to Q a lot. I absolutely love Q's perspective on this. Q is absolutely here representing the pro AI perspective. He's going to be here. He definitely believes in AI in the future of the SOC. He's very much leaning into it at Pearson. And in our conversations, you can tell that he's very, very immersed in a lot of the things that are going on with AI. Gentlemen, welcome to the stream. Before I cut loose with the first questions, I do want to remind our audience, this was actually asked in sub chat. They had asked me about you guys' operational, tactical level backgrounds. And I had assured chat that both of you are very, very smart, very, very technical, and very, very tactical. Rudy, really quick, starting with you, if you give us a quick synopsis of kind of like your operational on the ground, kind of experience and perspective on how you see the world.
Yeah, well, I started my career as a vulnerability researcher and then migrated into SOC analyst, security engineer, all the way up through managing security operations centers globally for a managed security service provider, and then into product groups. So I feel that rare sense of coming up through the technical chops. I know the job intimately. I know the ins and outs of what can and cannot be done and where the nuance lives. So I feel I'm well qualified to debate that side. So
absolutely. Q, over to you now as well.
It's great to be here. So I grew up more on the networking platform side, building high performance platforms and networks for trading systems, market makers. And then I ended up getting into security because of a lot of the various attacks that we started seeing at E-Trade. And then that was a combination of cyber and fraud. And with that, just really being able to enable the business to move at a fast pace, but keeping our customers safe.
Thank you for that, Q. So as you can see, chat, I did bring some folks who don't just sit on the podium of CISO. They've spent some time at the level with you in the SOC and in the operations center to kind of represent kind of both sides of this. With that being said, some really quick debate rules for my gentlemen on the panelist. I'm going to ask a question to one of you in either a pro or an anti-AI fashion in four respective areas. You'll have a few minutes to respond to that individually, and then I'll offer it up to rebuttals to your opposing candidate. Any questions, comments, or concerns about debate rules?
None.
Cool.
I'm good.
All right. First question is over to you, Q. Q, according to IBM's cost of data breach report in 2023, organizations leveraging AI and automation identified and contained breaches 28 days faster and saved nearly 1.8 million more than those that did not. Given these stats, do you believe AI should now be considered mandatory in modern SOCs? And how do you respond to critics who say these benefits are exaggerated?
I agree that it should be a part of the modern SOC. It's already there, right? Some of the EDR tools that you use, some of the SIMs, and they already have AI built into it, whether you like it or not. So the more that you can start leveraging those capabilities, the more that you can start extending those capabilities, you're going to be able to identify potential risks faster, potential foothold situations faster, and then contain them before they become a breach. That's in terms of the IBM report. I think it's fairly accurate, but it's also tends to lean toward worst case or best case scenarios. Any one of us that have been involved in a breach, a lot of it is dependent on what's the scope, how much data do they acquire, and how sensitive is the data. So when they say that average is around $4 to $5 million for a breach, it varies. So the benefits will also vary. A lot of it's going to be situational. What's the benefit you can get? How fast can you identify challenges and issues, and then how quickly can you respond to them? But it definitely does reduce the time to identify and minimizes the dwell time.
Rudy, over to you for a rebuttal.
Yeah, I think cost to recover at an atomic level is probably aided by AI a little bit, but I think what IBM is overlooking in that report is they're probably not counting the cost to recover from errors that AI may make, and things like retraining models, adversarial people going after models and changing their techniques so previous detections no longer work is a big reality that likely costs a lot of money in retraining, and being able to develop these technologies, redeploy them, sanitize data and ensure data quality is going to be a perennial, like ongoing cyclical challenge that we have. So I don't believe that report would capture that kind of total cost of ownership of managing systems like this at scale.
Q, any rebuttal to Rudy's statement there?
Yeah, I think that's already happening today. And let's take AI out of the mix. I mean, people are already doing that work. They're making mistakes. They're sanitizing data, trying to understand where it is. This will allow you to do things faster and more efficiently. And it's not saying that there won't be mistakes. And that's why you need to make sure there are guardrails in place that allow you to identify potential anomalous patterns. Even just basic data sanitization, data migration, any of that kind of stuff. We're already monitoring that, right? So you just got to make sure that you understand what the heartbeat looks like, and then you can respond to it and ensure that your models are effective.
All right, this is going to be over to you, Rudy. Feel free again. If I didn't know if I caught a breath there, Rudy. If you want to respond to Q, let me know. But feel free to. You good? Okay. So question 2 is actually over to you, Rudy. Proponents of AI argue that AI-powered analytics can sift through millions of data points far faster than human analysts, drastically reducing alert fatigue. With AI-based triage now claiming over 90% accuracy in some platforms, and the source for this is Palo Alto's Cortex's XSIAM demo at RSAC in 24, why wouldn't every SOC be moving in that direction?
Yeah, I'd argue that, are we looking at triage accuracy in the aggregate, or are we looking at across environments that are homogeneous? One thing I don't believe, or we've run into actually, is how can specific data to our environment and our platform be triaged and learned effectively with AI, especially if we have like a smaller subset. I don't come from a massive environment. We have like a smaller one that probably takes a longer time to train and create a baseline, and it might be good at something like the level of a service provider where they have a very large sample size to train over and over again. But I'm to some extent reticent and skeptical that we'd be able to achieve that same claim in an environment that's smaller and takes longer to realize that value. So that's where I would stand against that claim right forward there.
Q, rebuttal to
that? Depending on the environment, I think when you talk about smaller environments, there's probably things that you can gain efficiencies from related to just the commodity type attacks, right? So if you talk about ransomware, ransomware, it's pretty straightforward. And being able to leverage AI to make those detections and mitigations pretty quickly really protects your company from that. And it also brings capacity back to your security operators to focus on things that are very unique to your business. And it also gives you time for the AI, for you to train the AI to understand the specifics of the business and what's the real value area that you want the AI to focus on that can give you capacity, that can give you speed and accuracy. It doesn't mean that you're going to do everything, but it's really about where's the most value and where do you really need the speed and effectiveness.
Rudy, you want to rebut to that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say I'm not going to dispute the value in commodity attacks and detecting commodity things, and I think by and large we've done very well at that, and AI is going to help improve that from that perspective. But the things that keep me up at night the most are the bespoke and unique things that are unique to our environment and our stack and our tooling. And specifically, I think you can probably appreciate with your background of fraud at E-Trade, like fraud is extremely iterative, and it's a game of whack-a-mole where one attack will succeed quickly over a weekend, then we can put countermeasures in place that largely defeat that. But then within another couple of weekends, we've got adversaries that have tested and detected new attacks, and I think those things are the type of things that we want to put the best technology and horsepower against. And I think AI has a long way to go until it gets there and is effective at that. Taking care of the commodities, that's nice, but then does the expense and cost of deploying and training AI make up for those commodity results at the expense of the things that are more impactful, but maybe like a little bit less likelihood, a little bit more difficult to detect with artificial intelligence? So
Q, since Rudy invoked your time at E-Trade, I want to give you an opportunity to rebut to that as well.
Sure. So a lot of the fraud that we saw was the initial ones were commodity based, right? And then they would start to tune and figure out and probe and figure out how do you get around a lot of the controls or countermeasures that you have. using AI, you can actually get into a lot of details and do the analysis quicker. So let me give you an example. When we got into the data around user agent strings, it would take my team maybe a couple hours to 24 hours, depending on sophistication. We would look at how are fonts being displayed, and then it would give you an indicator. Are they using an emulator? That font looks very strange, and that's not the way it typically is represented. So it looks like they're using a Linux box to emulate a Windows box, right? So it took us time to do that. But using AI, a lot of those things you can discover pretty quickly. And that's what I mean by commodity. Those are pretty standard tactics. And then using AI, you can discover those very quickly to get rid of those or block those outright. And then understand what are the potential patterns that you could see in the future, or also what are they doing to potentially get around your controls. That's where AI becomes interesting. It doesn't mean it's going to replace humans in terms of thinking, but I think what it can do is that it can iterate very quickly around all the options, and then humans will take a look at it and figure out, here's the most probable ones that we want to focus on.
Okay. Moving on to question 3. Q, this is going to be for you first on this one. Gartner predicts that by 2026, 60% of SOCs will rely heavily on AI for tier 1 and tier 2 triage work. What do you say to organizations still staffing large tier 1 analyst teams? Are they wasting money, or is there a balanced middle ground?
It's going to take time, but they need to start using AI to really understand their environment, as Rudy mentioned. The sooner you get into the ecosystem, having AI brought into play and really understanding nuances of your environment is going to help you ensure that you got the proper staffing. But the other thing it's going to do is that it's also going to train your talent that you currently have really how to effectively use AI. You don't just go in there and just say, all right, let me ask the AI question. There is a skill set required to actually prompt AI effectively to get the right answers, and also to continue to challenge it so that you're validating the answers. That's a skill set that needs to be nurtured and developed. That's why universities out there are actually having classes around this to help individuals. And also a lot of companies are having classes to educate and learning frameworks to educate their employees in terms of how to use AI effectively to become more efficient at your job. And that's what's going to happen within the SOC, is that you're going to see initial entries, people learning how to effectively use it, and then eventually getting to a point where you've got people at the tier 2 level that can really, really do some interesting things with AI. Very similar to how we started with query in the early days, right? We had people asking questions, and then afterwards, like, show me the script. And that's how a lot of my SOC learned how to effectively script to find anomalous patterns within the data.
So Rudy, I saw you scribbling really fast on your notepad down there. Do you have a rebuttal to that one?
I'm just trying to be polite. Yeah, it's like, okay. So one thing I love about what Q said, I believe, like a lot of what makes me reticent about AI is I feel it's one of those, and this is not just like within the SOC. I think it's most AI that I see people using. Is I wish there was like a driver's license or something where people will get qualified to use some of this stuff before they start, prompting and regurgitating garbage all across the internet. But I think that's largely something that we need to be careful of as this technology proliferates. Is how can we enable the tier 1s, to kind of graduate to tier 2 work, but also put the time in to ultimately learn those tier 1 chops to be able to, I guess, double check the AI to ensure that it's doing accurate analysis or providing accurate information back, so that if there is some kind of error or problem, we can catch that without having to kind of like shift the problem to, instead of needing, like maybe a dozen tier 1 operators and one tier 3 person, how can we avoid having to have like 4 or 5 tier 3 level aptitude people, because there's such a skill gap that we create that basically tier 1s and tier 2s take a longer time getting to develop those skills, because they aren't doing it as deliberately as they would and before they had the tools to do it longhand, like always using a calculator for calculus before learning the underlying algorithms and doing it longhand, that type of a thing.
Q, do you want to send a rebuttal to that one?
I don't disagree with you, but I'm going to use the example of early days of Splunk. It would aggregate a lot of data for you and give you basic information. And then they started to build models. Do we actually train people on the basics of those models, or do we leverage their sophisticated models and then respond to the outcomes of it? And that's what I'm seeing with the future state of AI, is that we're going to continue down that path. We're going to have specialists. You're never going to get away from specialists that really dig into it and challenge it. And that's where you really need to focus on people. I'm going to refer to it as the challenger or the red teaming group, to make sure that the AI is still doing what it should be doing. But not everyone that's going to be at a tier 2 or tier 1 level is going to be doing that. You're going to have a specialist group, and that's how things are going to evolve.
Okay. So that was section 1. We're going to move into section 2 now. And this one's going to start off with Rudy. We're going to lead in with you on this one, Rudy. So you get the first jab at this section here. Now, Rudy, as you and I have talked, you've come from a history where you've been part of ML programs in the past, and that kind of seeded a little bit of that baseline skepticism that you have, around AI. But AI platforms today use unsupervised learning to detect zero-day anomalies that traditional rule-based systems miss. Given the recent case where Darktrace AI detected lateral movement 3 hours before human security operations centers did, and this came out of their 2023 threat report, how do you dismiss that kind of advantage?
I won't say it's dismissive of the advantage. I'd say is it dismissive of the model of the operating of the SOC in and of itself. It's like, is it 3 hours ahead of human detection because there was no information available to a human, or a human available to make that determination, or the correct expert logic within their existing SIM platform or whatever the stack looked like to put that alert in front of a human? Or was it purely because the technology had precognition to be able to determine that, hey, this is an attack that we need to basically investigate and escalate it to a human analyst? That is, I think, something we would have to uncover to understand. But I'd be reticent to say that the information that was available to the machine itself would be something that a human would miss outright without the capabilities of that AI.
Q, do you want to rebuttal to that?
I think going forward, though, we're probably on the same page where we're not going to blindly trust AI. But what we're going to do is what we've always done, is that we're going to have guardrails that are going to continue to validate, are the models and are the agents actually executing the way that we expect them to? Are they being effective, or are they starting to degrade? But then you're looking at the overall ecosystem. So in ML, you're looking at the data to make sure that it wasn't being poisoned. There wasn't any type of low and slow that was potentially influencing the model to respond in a way that was engineered for the adversary. And that's what we did on the fraud side. We would look at the models. We'd make sure that there was a sample set so that it was responding the way that we expected it to, and we would compare it to the real world results. And if we saw any type of deviation, we would drill in pretty effectively, or we would drill in pretty fast, and also understanding that, is this expected just because of the data set that was in there and it was a legitimate data set, or are we seeing an unusual pattern that we really need to figure out what's the root cause of?
So unless Rudy's got a rebuttal to that, that's actually a great lead-in, Q, to the question that I had for you at the second part of this debate. I think both of you kind of are somewhat aligned on the previous answer. But Q, for you specifically, many AI products that exist today and many AI decisions that are being made in the SOC are still very much considered black box type of applications and programs. If you can't explain a response to regulators, especially coming from a highly regulated environment and having to deal with a lot of complexity and where you're dealing with right now, if you can't explain that response to regulators or during an incident response, how can you trust the machine? Isn't this a major governance risk?
You need to be able to explain it, but then there are different ways that you can explain it. So if you think about getting to a verdict through circumstantial evidence, right? That's how we structure, how we monitor our models. One is, do you have transparency? And if not, do you have enough data points around it to say that, yes, it is responding the way it is supposed to, and it's explainable based on all the metadata and circumstantial data related to it. And that's the way we look at it, right? The other component of that, too, is that if we're not comfortable, my team will go in and actually drill in and manually walk it and then gather the evidence they need to and compare it to what the model did. We don't do that in every instance, but If it's something that's related to a significant incident that we want to be able to ensure that we can defend if we end up going in front of a regulator, that's what we do.
Rudy, you want to rebut to that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think in certain industries, the imputability of evidence that's coming off of any kind of data that was processed by artificial intelligence or a machine learning algorithm is automatically going to be suspect. And I'm not aware of any kind of case law that exists where that's been largely either accepted or defeated in court. And I think the axiom that we used to use back before AI was called Gen AI or AI, back when we were largely calling it machine learning, was that changing anything changes everything effectively. So if you change one of the inputs to a model and it's informing you either another model or some other output in some other system, all those corrections need to cascade. There's basically a Google research paper that anyone can go out there and kind of read a lot of these concepts. That was called something like machine learning is the high interest rate credit debt of technical debt, and a great paper that lays out like all these concepts that actually came to fruition in real life with the underlying technologies that's now the building blocks of like the systems we're talking about today. And it might be okay in certain sectors that are like either not regulated or like there's no kind of like financial or court ramifications of the output, but bringing some of these things into a courtroom, I think we have a hard task in front of us to figure out how input A going through black box results in input B consistently. And being able to explain what's going on between A and B is not trivial, and it's not something that's easily explained to laymen. And it's not even easily explained to some people who are like deep professionals within the space.
Q, I saw you shake your head on that one. Did you have a little rebut to that one? You want
to? The way that I've been always thinking about this stuff is that if there's critical items that are going to go in front of regulators, right? Maybe you don't use the full scope of AI, right? There's stuff that that can be defended effectively. It's transparent, it's explainable, and that's what you leverage. In the other areas where you don't have as much regulatory or potentially litigation exposure, then you move ahead with what you can leverage out of AI to get the most efficient results. But then the next stage, you need to make sure that you're doing a lot of rigor. So a lot of the regulations require explainability, require transparency, and also require that you appropriately document what you're using. So a lot of that process will bring in transparency and explainability. And then there's also a decision point. Do you feel that there's too much risk, or do you need to accept it because the return on investment is worthwhile? And that's a constant review that we go through.
Okay. Moving on to the next question, Rudy, this one's going to be for you first. And obviously we stream in front of thousands and thousands of people every week. And so there's always the human side of things when we start talking about AI and the SOC and whatnot. And so AI-based SOCs, I was just at FSISAC, the AI-based SOC was everywhere. I think, you're probably seeing it at a lot of conferences these days. RSACs are right around the corner. I'm sure we're going to see it at RSAC. But AI-based SOCs are saying that they may reduce entry-level jobs and training opportunities. If we're relying on machines to do all of the grunt work, where do tomorrow's defenders come from? Isn't there a risk of eroding the pipeline of cybersecurity talent?
I say there's likely a risk that we slow the development of talent, but I'll draw attention to the concept of it's called Jevons paradox. It's been around for a while when efficiencies kind of emerge in technology. I think it started with using coal to power steam engines up and down the Mississippi River, and it basically says that as machines become more efficient, those other resources actually become consumed more than less because it makes it easier and cheaper to operate those machines. And I think human capital is one of those resources that we use in our day in and day out, that we might create so much work or make it so easy to spin up an operations center or capabilities or enable people that instead of having to go to service providers, maybe we're able to enable some of these smaller medium businesses down the chain to spin up the capabilities. But then they need someone who's a tier 1, tier 2 type person, or tier 2, tier 3 type person, and they're just simply unavailable because we've shifted the capacity and intellectual skills gap problem higher up the chain. So that's my thoughts on that.
Q, you want to rebuttal to that?
We're already dealing with that problem. Let's forget about AI, right? Just the requirement to have that level and skill set out there, we're dealing with that today. I don't think we're going to lose that talent. I think what we're going to do is just get more creative in terms of how we find really smart people that are able to do level 1, level 2 type work. When I look at the early days of building a SOC, it was really, really hard to get talented people to come in. And so what we ended up doing is that we ended up creating a cyber range. We ended up creating a program. What are some of the basics we'd want people to understand how to do? And then we ended up going and hiring really smart people. And it was based on what kind of questions would they ask? How intellectually inquisitive are they? And then how would they then take off with the challenge in front of them? And I think we're not really going to lose that. We're just going to give new tool sets to those types of people so that they can actually get up to speed faster.
Rudy, any rebuttal to that?
No, not a clear rebuttal, but I'll just say yes. I think we fundamentally agree on the problem. And I think what it is those challenges and tactics to solve the skills problem where we're going to have to get people. We might be thinking we're alleviating that kind of problem, but my gut is it might actually make it like a harder problem to solve. We might have to do more of those things.
All right, we're going to move on to section 3. We're going to start with Q with you first. This is our ethical, strategic, and operational considerations part of AI. So Q, we're going to start first with you, and we're going to talk about some ethics. AI in the SOC opens up the possibility for unintended bias in detection. You know this. You've got somebody on your team right now who is very, very passionate about unintended bias in AI models. I think you know what I'm talking about. Say flagging behaviors as malicious simply because they differ from a trained baseline. How do you safeguard against these risks without compromising response speed?
The way that we do it is that we take a look at any of the deviations, right? Part of it is around, is that normal for that particular activity, for that particular individual, that particular population, even though the AI might flag it as malicious? And then we'll make the requisite actions around it. But a lot of it is really just understanding your business, what's the pulse and tone of it, what's normal. And even when you have AI, you still have to have a pulse on the business and the activities and what your customers are doing, and to be able then to go, all right, that just doesn't feel right.
Rudy, any response to that?
Yeah, well, I'll say I heard you say it this time and then a couple of times in a few of the other responses about adding processes and things to kind of double check and validate the AI and everything. And I think what we want to take stock of is where are we in the hype cycle of all this? And is it one of those things where all the efficiencies that we think we're gaining are being offset to an extent by all these additional things that we need to do to kind of check and rein in and ensure that the new capability isn't running outside of its bounds? Like, is it all it's been cracked up to be, maybe not as much as we thought?
Q, that seemed pretty direct to you about some of your previous responses. How would you like to respond to that?
I agree with Rudy. Anything that we do, you go through a rigorous process. You don't just throw it in there and go, no, this is really exciting. I bought into whatever the particular vendor is telling me. It's trust but verify. So we put everything through its paces. Even when the business comes to us and says, this is an amazing product, it's got AI involved in it, my team will go in and dissect it to understand, what does AI do? How does it communicate out? Where does the data go that it acquires? And also, where does it put all that information? So we did that when DeepSeek came out and said, it's going to China, can't use it. But then when we spoke and took a look at what Microsoft as well as Google were offering, it was self-contained and it was kept within our tenant, and then we approved that for use. So we do that with anything that comes in. We don't just blindly believe it, but we're going to validate it, and then we're also going to continue to monitor to make sure that nothing has changed or nothing is stuck in, so that we're comfortable that it is providing value, but it's not creating any additional risk.
So with that, Rudy, I'm gonna pivot on to the next question, because I think this one kind of talks a little bit. Unless did you have a specific rebuttal that were you scribbling?
Next question's fine.
Okay, all right. Because I think this one kind of speaks a little bit to what Q's saying and kind of a little bit to your stance, right? Is that some argue that resisting AI is itself a risk in the enterprise, and adversaries are embracing automation, they're embracing AI-based attacks. Aren't defenders who avoid AI simply outgun? Isn't standing still a strategic vulnerability in and of itself?
You could say that, but then also, how are we developing fundamental skills if we're ignoring AI? Understanding how it works, but then also basically going through and ensuring that we have the skills to handle things at volume and basically understand what is and isn't, kind of if our adversaries are using AI just to generate threats faster, does that absolutely mean we need to use AI to detect those threats faster? Likely not if it's the same type of a threat, just like a sheep of wolf's clothing or a sheep of a different color type of a thing. I don't believe so.
Q, you want to respond to that?
I think we do need to use AI. That doesn't mean you blindly trust it. The faster you can identify stuff, the better that you can minimize the impact. So I'm constantly thinking about how do we identify things at the earliest possible point so that we can minimize what the potential impact is. The other thing too is that when we think about AI, it's a continual evolution. The things that you look at the SOC today, what do they use? They kind of rely on those technologies to give them the information they need, and then they decision how to action it. AI is doing the same thing. It's just able to do it faster. It's able to get access to more information. It's able to put more options in front of you, but you still, as a human being, have to have the requisite knowledge, experience to make the right decisions.
Rudy, any response to that?
No, I agree with that, actually. We need smart people to be using these things if we're going to use them.
We're going to move on to kind of the last section, section 4. We've got some questions lined up for the community. Reminding the community to get the questions in. Make sure you're specific about who you want to ask the question to and what it's about. But this one's actually tailored. We actually did create a section that was specifically around community concerns that I've heard from various streams that I've done on this topic and things that we've talked about in our Discord and things like that. I'm going to start with you, Q, on this one. AI has a reputation for hallucinating context or flooding dashboards with false positives and poorly trained models. I'll get to you here in a second, Rudy, for this one, but can you share, Q, a situation where AI has failed you in the SOC or where it added more confusion, did clarity, and what lessons should the broader community take away from that?
So when we first used AI, what it did was that it, out of the box, it gave us a lot of things, right? And then when we looked at it, a lot of alerts. It's like, oh, okay, this communication is wrong. It's probably this type of attack. So when we looked into it, we realized that it was bad code from a developer. And then we were able to fix this. It's not dissimilar. This is from Containment. It's not dissimilar to like when we first rolled out a SIM at E-Trade. It was ArcSight, and then we got all these alerts that we were being hacked. And then what we found out was that there were developers that were using their own personal accounts, and then when their passwords were reset, they forgot that it was embedded in the application, and then we get flooded with failed login attempts. So it's very similar. And so when you roll out anything new, you have to really burn it in. You have to understand, what is it detecting? Is that rational? Is it an issue within the environment, or is the model wrong and you have to continue to feed and tune it effectively?
Over to you, Rudy. Can you share a situation where AI has failed you in the SOC or where it's added more confusion, did clarity?
Well, I'd say not outright failure, but sometimes you think you're going to get one thing and you definitely get something else that's maybe helpful but less helpful than what you hoped for. So like we deployed a very large scale kind of machine learning model in my past where we thought it'd be kind of maybe naively the holy grail of like replace a lot of analysts and allow us to scale very quickly. But what we found is it actually amplifies past errors that might be there, even if they were small. So it had us shift kind of focus really more to making it a QA tool and having like a lot more QA on the decisions that were made kind of at scale before we were able to implement that tool. So that's one kind of just like lived example of how, we deployed something that was fundamentally sound, got literal like PhDs within the field at the time to help build and architect these engines so that they were correct by theory, but then in practice we got something completely different than what we were expecting.
So we're gonna start this time. This one's gonna come to you, Rudy, pretty fast. A concern I've heard from frontline analysts is that leaning on AI tools too much dulls their analytic edge. How do you preserve critical thinking and deep expertise in these AI automated SOC, type of environments?
Yeah, I think it's like studying any other kind of martial art. You got to have like a coda, and if you're not getting like new fancy things to look at in practice, you got to be looking for things outside of like the real threat work to emulate things that you might see in the environment. And I think, I kind of come from a background where we were managed services and saw everything in every type of environment, so you didn't have to do that as deliberately. But if I think about folks in, kind of one industry, small SOC, where they're only seeing the certain things that come across their desk, they're doing themselves a disservice if they're not getting out there, looking for new things to dissect, doing challenges and CTFs and things like that to keep themselves sharp. So part of it, a little bit of personal responsibility there, and kind of being of aware of where you are in the ecosystem. And if you think AI is making your job a little bit more dull or drab or less predictable, if you seek, you will find opportunities to sharpen the saw.
Q, over to you for this one. Or did you have a rebuttal to that one, or are you good with that one?
No, I agree with Rudy.
All right, so over to you for this one. This one came in as, even if AI in the SOC proves technically viable, many orgs, and I specifically highlight you because you've been in a lot of large organizations, many orgs struggle with adoption. I know you know this one. This one hits very close to you in terms of adoption. Analysts don't trust the insights, engineers don't want to integrate it, and leadership may not understand it. Isn't the bigger question, how do we lead through this shift, not just build it?
That's exactly the question. Anytime you have a shift, it's around leading, right? What do your people need? What are they afraid of? What does the business need? What do the customers need? And then what's the real sweet spot where you bring in the new capabilities initially? And then how does that help your people? How does that help the company and your customers? Where we brought in AI, my team was struggling with just getting visibility. Their complaints were, we've got so much data, we don't know what to focus on. And then when we get the results, we just don't have the time to go through it. So we as a team said, where would we get the most value? What would you like it to do? And then we use that as a prototype.
Rudy, any rebuttal to that one?
I think similar response. I'll bring it back to the kind of hype cycle mental model. Is our team's always been kind of on the edge of trying to enable the business to explore and use AI in a way that's safe. But then it's like when you start to put it in practice and then kind of get to the point where you have all these expectations about what it's going to deliver, and then you hit that like trough of disillusionment or whatever they call that phase. It's like, how do we kind of either double back on what we put in, or effectively tweak it in a way that's safe, that can actually like provide value if it's there or not. And sometimes like there's no value, you have to pivot. And part of that, this is all like a vision and a leadership exercise, right? Is anytime there's disruption or change in any environment, be it a SOC, be it an industry, a business, an economy, it's kind of setting that North Star and keeping people like optimistic towards the path forward rather than throwing their hands up. So it's kind of agree with the response and the effect of like, it's a leadership competency challenge rather than like, how can we tactically do this thing?
Love it. All right, gentlemen, that's it for the barrage of questions. I'm going to give you both about 2 minutes to do closing remarks on your position, both for and against, AI in the SOC, and then I'll go to some of our community questions. Reminder, community, to keep the questions coming in, and we'll try to get those knocked out, as well. So for closing remarks, Rudy, I'm gonna head over to you for first closing remarks, since Q got first question on anti-AI in the SOC.
Yeah, I think AI is going to make its way into the SOC, whether we love it or not. It's going to be a feature in the things our suppliers want to deliver to us. But I think what it is we have to curb our expectations about what we're going to get and how quickly we can adopt it, and raise the flag that we're succeeding in reducing costs as aggressively as those that we buy from would like us to believe. And a lot of it has to do with kind of understanding the pitfalls. There's a lot of devils in the details and the nuance about how we deploy these technologies. I mean, I'll leave it with the analogy of like when Edison, kind of developed the phonograph, his intention was to be able to distribute sermons across the world, but really what it ended up being adopted for and using in practice is spreading jazz, which is all great. It's fun stuff, but at the time that was probably exactly the antithesis of the intent of what he had for that technology. So it could very much be the same for us in our security operations roles. We bring this technology into our environments.
Q, over to you for your closing remarks.
I agree with a lot of what Rudy said. So AI is here to stay. It's going to continue to get better and make more inroads. The thing that we as professionals and leaders have to do is lead our teams to understand how do you maintain the proper rigor around AI. Don't believe everything. Challenge it. Confirm what it can really do, what it does really well, and where the value can be added. The other thing that was surprising that came out of our journey around AI was that there's a couple of people within the team that stepped up, and then we've got a really good developer that's building interesting models, and then we have someone else that was really interested in the architecture side and is drilling into anything new that comes in and is able to call out challenges and issues, and he's the one that discovered the issue with DeepSeek. So it's not going to get rid of jobs. I think it's going to create more opportunities, and it's also going to allow people to move up the value chain where they might be able to get into areas that they felt they couldn't get into. So the individual that I was sharing about the vendor space, he was just a developer, but then he ended up getting into architecture because he quickly ramped up and got the passion around AI to really understand what it does. And now he's the go-to guy within the company where people go to him with different models as well as technology solutions and want him to come back with a recommendation around where it can be used and how it can be used.
Awesome. Real quick, gentlemen, thank you so very much. We're not done yet. Chat, don't go anywhere. We've got some questions that we want to get to. Just for moderating this, I want to thank you both for being here. And chat, just in the essence of transparency, Rudy took on the position of anti-AI in the SOC, and he did so at my specific request because we did need a villain in this debate to have a villain there. But Rudy, I know that you have a very strong, pro message around AI in the SOC, and I want to give you an opportunity, a platform to deliver on that because I don't want people to think that you're here being a baddie, poo-pooing on AI in the SOC altogether.
Oh, it's all good. I think all my concerns are actually still valid, even though I'm extremely excited and an avid dabbler in all these technologies myself. And I'm excited for the pace of change that it's going to bring to the tools that we're able to bring to bear to the bad guys. So that's my actual position on all of it. I'm always encouraging our team to use whatever they can within AI to help, basically get the job done faster, but then ultimately, what they need to know is they own that work too. So they're responsible for that output, which kind of compels them to have a good understanding of, how this thing is working and what it's doing on their behalf. And I think that's what we all need to do as well.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Rudy. And again, thank you for being such a good sport with that. Q, I'm going to pop this question over to you first. We got a Twitch viewer who says, so would the SOC analyst role become obsolete because of AI? And this is a question that I think I get asked all the time. It is one of the most common questions that we absolutely get asked on this stream. And so I want people to hear it from CISO's mouth, especially one like yourself who does firmly believe in a lot of the future of AI. Do you think the SOC analyst role is going to become obsolete because of AI?
No, I don't think it's going to become obsolete. I think it's going to evolve, and it's going to change the way that they do their job. A lot of the stuff that the AI is going to do is a lot of the commodity work, right? Going back to the early days of SIMs, and then when Splunk came on the scene, and then when they were building their different models, it didn't replace SOC analysts. What it did is that it empowered them to do more, to do it more effectively, and gave them more information so that they can make the right decisions. And that's how I see AI. I don't see this as some type of complete replacement for a human being. I think it's just another tool in the toolbox that will help us be more effective against the adversaries. And the other challenge in that space is that, as you mentioned earlier, the adversaries are very, very progressive in terms of new capabilities to figure out how can they be effective at finding ways to get in. So we need to understand how can we use technologies to discover or at least point us into the areas that we should be worried about that may have smoke.
Rudy, any response to that? Or any response to the question there? Or your thoughts?
Well, yeah, on the note, like SOC analysts, they're the tip of the spear and probably the most important role in all of what we do as far as getting ahead of the threat and understanding it. And I can just speak to my experience, which was like early '90s. We literally had to write C code to like take apart network packets, and then we graduated to like T-Shark and TCP dump, and we had these tools. And then along came like Blaster and Sasser, and all these things
You were
changed.
definitely aging yourself in this conversation.
Well, I'm an old man now. Like, what can you do? Like, so does the gray on my face, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, the moral of the story is like the guys that do the job now, the guys and gals that are doing the SOC analyst job for us, like they're looking at things like within cloud environments, cloud workloads, authentication, things that I just don't understand now in my role as intimately as I once did, like the bits and the bytes talking the systems together. So that role is never going to go away. It's going to change. The type of skills you need to focus on are going to change, and the tools that you get to use and bring to bear to the job are going to evolve and be a lot better. But that doesn't mean that the role's going away or it's any less important. It's the most important one we have.
Sticking with you really quick on this one, Rudy. This is a great question. I've got a two-parter to this one because I've got a follow-on to this as well. But you first, Rudy. In your opinion, when would you push against using AI?
When we could not validate, basically, if there was no like bias or a kind of harm, being done from the output. Basically, it's like if we can't, I don't want to say fully understand, because I don't think you can like ever fully understand any of these technologies. But if we were using it, in a way that was either like unethical or in a way that would introduce bias, we'd have to say absolutely not.
How about you, Q?
Very similar, right? Going through the rigor, if it doesn't meet our criteria that we're comfortable, that we can stand on the results, then we're going to push back on AI. And we've done that in a couple of different situations, right? It's around, all right, that's great that it's taken all that data, but frankly, the results aren't giving us any ability. It's creating more work for us. And if we take the action that it told us to do, it was a really bad false positive.
I want to follow on with a kind of a joint one between that last question and this one as well, because we talked about AI replacing SOC analysts and SOC analysts being the tip of the spear. If I asked you both, and Q, I'll start with you on this one. If I asked you to think about a world where your answer to that might change, what would AI's maturity or what capabilities would AI need to have where your answer on that SOC analyst replacement, where might that change?
It's going to be when AI gets real intelligence and then understanding, can it actually do and make the leap of logic that human beings with a deep expertise and knowledge base have. Then it becomes a question of can actually the AI do a lot of things that a level one analyst does, and do we even need a level one analyst at that point?
How about you, Rudy? Is there a line in the sand where you think there's a capability that AI would have to possess or demonstrate, where maybe your answer to that question would change?
Yeah, well, I think even more broadly than just in like security operations, and I think we were talking a little bit about when we were orienting is the when agentic capabilities allow systems to talk to other systems, and our security tools can work better together, and not just like our security tools working with each other, but the security tools working with systems across the enterprise to just do the detective work that we need to do on an in and out basis. I think that's the inflection point, specifically for security operations.
I love it. We're coming up to the top of the hour. I want to be super respectful. I got two very high-powered CISOs here. You guys have been absolutely amazing. Thank you so very much for participating in this stream. Thank you so very much for sharing your perspectives. I'm going to release you both, unless you got anything else that you want to say to the community or anything else like that. You guys good?
Nope. Thank you all for entertaining the debate.
Awesome. Thank you guys very much. I'm going to talk to my community really quick, and I'll see you both on respective text message threads a little bit later on. Chat, that was awesome. That was the first time we had done a format like that. Please let me know in community feedback on Discord if that was good, if that was what you expected. Obviously, I tried. It was very hard for me to not engage in that conversation as debate moderator. I'm not going to lie to you. It was super hard for me. I wanted to jump in there so many times. You guys, a lot of you know my stance on AI, and I wanted to respond a lot to what what Q and Rudy were saying. I absolutely love both those guys. I think both those guys are awesome. They're both high class individuals in their respective organizations and very forward leaning. And so mass respect for them for coming in here and doing this. Thank you very much for tuning in for another Sec Data Ops today on Thursday. Don't forget, tomorrow morning, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we'll be right back here for Tea with a Hacker. Absolutely loved it. Y'all stay awesome. Thank you to the Query team for supporting me on the back end. Thank you to all my moderators. Thank you to Rudy and Q for an awesome debate. And we will see y'all in the morning.